Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Stephen Johnson. I'll be your maitre d' for the next 45 minutes or so, talking about user experience, or specifically serving the viewer, and our extensive subtitle saying user experience, service selection, content discovery, personalization, engagement, social TV, app device integration. That's a bit much for 40 minutes or so, but we'll give it a whirl. And especially with this panel. I have been looking forward to this for months, just because Brian does a great job getting people every year, but I think we truly have quite the rock star panel today, and I'm really looking forward to digging in. As I said, my name's Stephen Johnson. I am a sort of boutique consultant for MSOs in the area of user experience, most recently working with our friends at Charter Spectrum, and have contributed a great deal to Brian's magazine, as well as panels here at OTT Exec. And I think I'll leave it at that. I'd like everyone on the panel to give me a short bio and perhaps describe a little bit your relationship to today's topic so we can get a little fix. Why don't we start with Dave?
Okay, good morning. My name is Dave Zimmer. I'm responsible for the ad-enabled experiences on the Fire TV for Amazon.com. That kind of is four different areas. The first is that I'm responsible for the licensing and business models for securing content that we put on the TV. Second is to actually do all the content discovery and the kind of the playback controls when you're looking at some of that content. The third is all the video and display advertising products that you'll see on the Fire TV UI. And then the fourth kind of gets into an area that I would call monetization strategies, but it's really just the overall P&L for the business.
Hi, Marc Beckwitt. I'm from Flix. We are a subscription video service. I'm responsible for business development, and it's primarily in two areas. One is everything that we need to create and operate the service, whether it's the different kinds of services we use, or it's around non-traditional partner alignment. And what I mean by that is we do a significant amount of engagement in Facebook and others to reach consumers, traditional marketing, what we'd call that. I try to think of all the non-traditional ways to partner with others to expand our reach, to just get the message out, or to help others. So that's what I do from a daily basis.
Hi, I'm Virginia Juliano, the CEO and founder of a free website and app called Cobblecord. Cobblecord helps consumers cobble together a personalized streaming bundle based on what they like to watch, how they like to watch it, and their price range. We have a patented process that crunches that information and gives them the streaming services that they should cobble together within their price range, and then above their price range, what they might also want to consider based on their profile. We are trying to help consumers navigate the exploding streaming landscape and help in discovery of the hundreds of streaming services out there that they probably never heard of before. Prior to launching Cobblecord, I was at Showtime Networks for 10 years, where I focused on subscriber acquisition and retention, distributor partnerships and marketing, and digital product development. I also helped bring their OTT service to market and led the effort on their marketing side. And that's when the idea for Cobblecord was born. We couldn't keep it all straight, and we were in the business, and there was just a fraction of the services available at that time. So I realized that consumers were going to need help, and so I built something to help them.
My name is Petersen. I run a product team at Comcast, focused on building a highly integrated OTT experience across video, music, games, any type of content. My background is I'm an entrepreneur, done startups most of my life, always focused around how consumers interact with entertainment. And at Comcast, I basically found a team that's highly focused on creating these great user experiences. And what we're really trying to solve is how can we make sure that the user doesn't have to worry about whether content is traditional TV, an OTT channel, or an OTT app. It shouldn't really matter for the user. They should just be able to find their content all in one place.
Same guy.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you all very much. I'd like to do a quick introduction of our Trender panelists as well. I know Brian kind of gave you a quick intro, but if you could also just let us know your I think you get a moniker like as well. So if you can let us know who you are. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Vlad. I'm a software developer, New York native. I like to watch TV, usually on Netflix, HBO, whether that's on TV or on my computer.
Hi, I'm Donna Palmer. I'm a human resources consultant. I live here in the city, and I watch TV on basic cable, Hulu, Amazon Prime.
I'm Carissa, and I usually watch TV on Netflix on either the TV, the computer, or my phone, and that's usually all I watch.
Thanks very much. And building on that, I think that's a good lead-in, actually, what you all described to our first topic today, which is basically content and app fragmentation. I'm very interested in hearing everyone's perspective on that. A few of the panelists already alluded to it. And it's really pretty hard to crack a article on OTT these days without saying there are so many services, so much choice. How can viewers find what they're looking for in this crowded marketplace? And it's going to get even crowded, more crowded, I should say. As my friend Alan Woke says, we're facing the Flix apocalypse, I think he calls it. So many services, so many different choices. Are we in need of a new aggregator, for example? Perish the thought. Or are there other ways of serving the viewer in a fragmented marketplace? And let's start with Dave on this one. We'll just go right down the line.
Yeah, we're in the kind of the new golden age of TV, but we're also in the new golden age of not knowing what to watch on TV. If you look at a Fire TV, for instance, we have tens of thousands of apps with over 500,000 TV shows and movies hidden behind each of those apps. And so part of our challenge at Amazon is trying to figure out how to help each of our 34 million active users find something to watch. And we've kind of narrowed it into kind of 3 areas that we're using to try to tackle the problem. First of all, it's a kind of a content-forward UI, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Then catalog integration. How do we get all that catalog from each of the apps and 3P developers into the Fire TV UI? And then voice, especially with Alexa. If you kind of think about where we're at in this kind of myriad of 500,000 movies out there, for us, we believe that we need to kind of look at something beyond the kind of the app tile metaphor. Most of the connected TVs out there right now borrowed from the mobile device kind of paradigm of apps. We think apps have some challenges. We will offer apps, but we also want to try to get the content outside of that app. And one of the things we're doing on the Fire TV UI is, first of all, on our homepage, you'll actually see that it's not just the app, but you'll also see the content. The content will be in kind of in that first row, both in what you're recently watching, so you don't have to remember what app that was in, as well as if you have any live or linear programming, you can actually get to that on our On Now kind of row, or the channel guide. But we're always trying to figure out how to get kind of the content from outside of that app into kind of the UI for the customers to be able to find that. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later.
Thank you, Dave. Marc, can you elaborate?
So at PureFlix, for us, it's all about focus. We are focused at the faith, family, and fun marketplace. So we know our lane. We know that our subscribers are looking for good, clean content. So what our goal is to deliver upon that. So we watch and screen everything to make sure it's meeting the vision and the expectation of the audience. And if it's not, we either ask the producer or licensor or ourselves to clean it up, or we just don't license it, so that the family knows, or the parents know, that when their family comes to PureFlix, they are getting an experience with no sex, language, or violence surprises. So for us, like Amazon, it's presenting a clear experience on how to find content, consume content, in lots of different ways with what we do behind the scenes, the data, the metadata, to surface interesting things. It's about curating that catalog in various ways to present it, and the data shows. We're celebrating our 4th anniversary. We aspire to have the 34 million audience, but we're growing nicely. Have almost 400,000 active users, but it's in the consumption. We've served nearly 60 million hours of video since our launch. but 27 million have been in the last 12 months. So users are finding us, using us, and staying with us. We have more than a 10-month average lifetime value. So we're delivering upon the expectations.
Thanks, Mark. Virginia, I think this one is right up your alley. So.
Yeah, I mean, from Cobblecord's perspective, we're all about consumer empowerment and giving people the tools to figure out what the best solution is for them. And, I think to your point about are there going to be aggregators, new aggregators, I think that from a viewing perspective and a watching perspective, that will certainly be helpful in surfacing content without having to go in and out of the walled gardens of apps. But what those new aggregators, such as Roku and Apple and the like, and Warner Media have to be careful about is recreating the much despised bundle that the traditional pay TV operators have been, forcing down consumers' throats for many years, and there's a lot of animosity there. So it's an opportunity to start fresh, and there are all sorts of business reasons why bundles make sense for the operators. But I think what was lost along the way was, how do they really benefit the consumer when they're being forced to subscribe to things that they don't want? And, they'd be willing, what we've seen is that people are willing to pay a little bit less to get rid of a lot of stuff that they never really wanted in the first place.
Thank you. Christian.
Yes, I think it's important to start with saying that we're definitely in this new world of where people are watching both traditional pay TV and the combination of that and OTT content. Puts it in perspective, there are still, the vast majority of homes still have the combination and are watching, on average, 5 hours of TV per day per home. And the vast majority of that is still traditional TV. So it's really important to see if you can basically bridge that gap for most of the homes. Now, there's still 20% of homes that don't have pay TV, either because they never did or because they decided to replace it with OTT content. But for the rest of the homes, combining the two is really important. And I think that people really want one place for all their content. So basically a trusted source of universal aggregation. One of the things that's happening is that when you're in this more siloed approach, people aren't really impressed with so-called personal recommendations if it ends up becoming only from one provider because it's in one app.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, from the content point of view, just to mirror what Mark was saying, we know the lane that we're in. And for us, as we enter into new markets, it's important for us as we continue to do programming, we be responsive to the markets that we're in, but we don't deviate from our brand, in terms of trying to cobble up some short-term ratings or some short-term advertising and sponsors. So for us, it's all about continuing to push the brand and working with our platform partners to get Gusto out as much as possible. I got to tell you, we really started doing OTT, pushing OTT in 2017, and I put about 1 million miles on this old carcass, flying all over the world, going to markets and talking to different OTT platforms and providers, and it's stunning how different it is the way people consume media in different countries. Like we were talking earlier on the difference between Singapore and Philippines. Like it's night and day. It's absolutely crazy. So I think you have to be responsive to the individual markets for sure.
Thank you, Chris. I want to get a quick check-in with our Trender panel, just because this is such a hot topic in a way. It's been bandied about for OTT for many months, if not years. I heard a lot of different services from the three of you. And let me just ask you outright, if you had a kind of magic wand to, I'm not going to use the word, the B word, bundle, but say aggregate all your content that you watch, all the different services, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, whatever, would that be useful to you? Would that be something you'd want? I'm not going to ask what it looks like. We'll query these folks about that. Or do you kind of enjoy browsing through the different services to find the content you're looking for? does aggregation matter, in short? Let's start with Carissa. Is that something you'd like, or is it just okay as it is?
I think it's okay as it is because I like searching through, like if I want to find like a show I want to watch, I could find like another show and watch that instead.
Oh, sort of stumble across
Yeah.
something else that
Yeah,
happens to be on the
that
same
I like,
service.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Donna?
I think it would be useful instead of moving between different services and different apps.
Sure. Vlad?
Yeah, I agree it would be useful. I generally don't scroll through like all of the choices because I find that's too much choice, but oftentimes I'll hear of like a really great show and I want to watch it, and then I have to find out like, okay, is it on Hulu? Is it on Netflix? Is it on HBO? Like, who do I know has an HBO password?
Careful. To that end, do you start with content, to follow up on that, do you start with the content or do you think of the service first? I'm just kind of curious.
I start with the content.
Yeah, figured. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I'd like to swivel a little bit to a topic I know a few of you have written about, I've written about as well, which is sort of the return of interactivity, as we call it. A lot of, regardless of how you find the content, a lot of OTT content obviously is being consumed on non-traditional devices. And this has led to everything from social TV engagement to Netflix bringing back the interactive storyline, which just bowled me over. So is interactivity, what we are now, I think, calling user engagement, a key piece of OTT content and apps going forward? Or is it just sort of a nice add-on, or somewhere in between? Obviously, people are interacting with their devices, they're bringing things up as they're watching, but is this truly a new paradigm to work with, or is it still a 10-foot experience, and this is sort of a nice little addition, shall we say? Let me start with Dave again. We'll go down the line.
Well, from our standpoint, I think that we're going to be experimenting in a lot of different areas, and I think it's still early days on interactive TV and exactly how a customer wants to either choose their own story or be able to interact like they would on a laptop or a mobile device. So from our standpoint, we're really focused on some of the other engagement areas. Interactive TV is still pretty early.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd agree. For us, it's early. Plus, we're a smaller company, so we're picking our bets wisely. Rather, we're looking. One of the things we've looked at harder at is the changing scope of content consumption from attention span, from long form content to short form, and how do we, as we're movie makers, from our history. So how do we adapt that? So things that we've done with some original content is. While it's been scripted as a theatrical and brought out as a theatrical, there's mind share in bringing it to a subscription service as a miniseries. So it's a natural part of the storyline that it was broken out into 3 or 4 or 5 episodes rather than just one continuous movie. So we're doing things to try to adapt to the changing consumption pattern.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I see it in sort of in a bifurcated way. The interactivity from the storyline perspective, I think that is definitely early days. I think it's going to shake out somewhat generationally. I think, maybe younger audiences might be a little bit more open to that. And also, depending on the device and contextually. But what I think we'll get into a little bit more is when I think of interactivity, I think more about owning your viewing and curation experience and being more interactive in that. So that's something that I think we'll talk more about.
Thanks, Virginia. Christian?
Yeah, I would say I pretty much agree with that. It really becomes a different experience, not because necessarily we have interactive movies. We've been chasing that for decades, and maybe it'll arrive sometime, but I think what's happening instead is that on that big screen, you can now choose between watching a video, listening to music, playing a game. We'll see user-generated content become more important. We've been quite successful with integrating YouTube content across our platform, and I think esports is definitely a key area as well. where we'll basically see that people start having both long and short and more interactive experiences in front of the TV.
Thank you.
Well, again, pardon me, as a content producer, you know, I've been in the business for 22 years, and interactivity has come up over and over and over and over again. At the end of the day, there's an executive producer sitting there going, okay, well, how much is this going to cost? And so until we figured out a way to do that, because multiple storylines and breakouts and breakthroughs and returning back to the original story script and pushing through, until you can figure out how to make something at a reasonable cost per minute, I think Netflix should be commended for having tried it. It didn't quite work, but I don't see a huge cry and demand on social media from viewers to get this interactive thing up and running by end of fiscal this year.
Right, right. Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of early days. Maybe this is coming along. Maybe the experiments are going. I want to turn to our trenders again and just check in on sort of the idea of interactivity. And by that, it's a very broad area. But what I'm looking for are, when you're watching, one, are you doing something else? And two, is there programming that feels just naturally interactive to you that you can either chat with your friends about, play along with, suggest other ways of working with whatever your device you're watching? Does that come up while you're watching, or is it fundamentally really just a lean back, watch the content experience, or is it somewhere in between? Blair, let's start with you this time.
I think most of the time, especially if I'm watching on a TV, like in my living room, I just want to like relax and not do anything. If I'm watching already on my laptop, like maybe because I have the keyboard right there, I might do something, but chances are not.
Okay, so it's kind of device dependent, in other words, like it depends on what you got up. Okay. Donna, you have any perspective?
Yeah, when I watch a show, I'm completely focused on the show, and so I'm just sitting there and into the content. I don't.
Okay, that's fair. But you've had to find it and scroll through some menus, perhaps, and so forth. After that point, once it started to stream, you're good. You don't want. Okay. Carissa, what happened to you?
When I'm on my phone, if I get like a text or anything, I go and text them back. But if I'm on TV, like I'm stuck on the couch.
Okay. So maybe a bit of a generational difference, perhaps. Anyway, thank you very much. Good perspective. I want to kind of zero in now on a couple of individual perspectives for our various panel members. And feel free, I'm going to address one of you in turn, but if someone else has a comment, please feel free to chime in. I want to start with Virginia, just because we've both written for OTT Magazine, and you brought my attention to an interesting point, and I think you alluded to it before, that about a user-empowered approach to content, as you mentioned it, and, quote, borrowing from lean-forward techniques of businesses such as online retail publishing, travel. Can you elaborate on this, what you call a user-empowered approach, and what that means for user experience?
Yes, I definitely have a lot of feelings about this one.
I can tell.
So yeah, I wrote an article for OTT Executive Magazine, the spring issue, which you have out there. I think we need to sort of rethink the definition of lean back. And, the interfaces of particularly the television viewing experience in the OTT space has been always lean back and serving up content and AI focused, which is great. Artificial intelligence, that has predictive learning and techniques is wonderful, but remember, it's artificial. It's missing a key perspective, and that's the perspective of the consumer, the user. I hesitate to even say viewer anymore, because viewer kind of connotes a very passive, let it wash over me experience, and that's great once you have found the content that you want to watch. And with all of the massive amount of choice out there now, the endless scrolling, rows has become more of a frustration than a help, than an assistance in many cases. That's what we've heard and some research that we've seen. So in order to counter that, why not borrow from some of the techniques of more established digital businesses like online retail, like someone like a Zappos that has done a tremendous job in multi-layer filtering. Click a few boxes and you can zero in on open-toe wedges in the color blue, with a 3-inch heel. That kind of filtering, which is, I would say, in a lot of the metadata that is already being flowed through the system, could be better utilized to help the consumer make that decision and then sit back and relax knowing that they've surfaced what they're looking for. And I think that AI can be supplemental, but I think that the weighting of the consumer choice and action should take precedent.
Thank you. Very interesting perspective. Dave, I have one. I've been wanting to ask someone from Amazon for a very long time, since you're a captive audience. You mentioned early days for interactivity, but I think Amazon's making no secret of using Alexa and voice control for Fire TV. Can you elaborate a little bit more on where Alexa's going forward for OTT? I know you probably have many plans for this, but just generally to address it, particularly some of the issues we raised earlier, fragmentation and user engagement.
Yeah, maybe you've heard of Alexa.
Good ask.
So when you think about kind of where voice is picking up in the OTT space, it's really around content discovery and playback. So imagine, if you will, that you want to watch free Matthew McConaughey dramas. You can either just say that, or you can actually try to figure out how to spell McConaughey and then type with your little remote 36 characters in order to try to find that. We think that's a natural place for voice when it's just using natural language to find actors, free drama, and then letting the AI actually kind of go through all those apps to find the content. It was interesting hearing Carissa talk about how she really wasn't for aggregation, but she just wants to be able to find her content. Well, you need to be able to figure out how to get to all that content so that that natural language kind of search actually gives you the correct results. When I'm at home, I can actually just go into my room and I can just say, Alexa, play The Handmaid's Tale. And then with a Fire TV Cube that has the Alexa far-field control, she'll actually turn on the TV, turn on the surround sound, open up the Hulu app, and then pick up The Handmaid's Tale where I last left off. We think that's pretty magical. That actually also happens to be kind of how people are actually using voice right now. If you looked at our searches right now, over 2/3 of the searches on the Fire TV platform are through voice rather than through a traditional text search.
Thanks, Dave.
The only thing I'd
Go
add
ahead.
to that, not to
Definitely.
jump in, is so that's a wonderful way to find the content, from an actual, getting it to activate. But there's a lot of work, for example, we have to do behind the scenes to make sure that the catalog is appropriately discoverable, right, for all the metadata. Again, we're a fun family and faith, so some of the nomenclature within our field are not some of the standardized things. So we have to add and make sure that the content is tagged appropriately, and then you can activate these great interaction methodologies to actually find, these not obscure, but not less than well-known titles that are serving that open-toed, but in our thing, something biblical or whatever it is. That the consumer can then interact with. So just something to keep in mind from a strategy. You got to put the stuff into the bones to let the other part shine.
I think that's a great point. And we really work with every single OTT provider to get their metadata so we can have that voice search across all the content. It really is the best way to cut away some of the steps of finding content. And we already have big success with our voice UI. I think last year we saw over 9 billion voice commands on X1.
My biggest takeaway from what Dave said is that apparently there are 3 Matthew McConaughey dramas. So.
Can you name them, though? You can ask Alexa. Okay. I want to follow up with Marc on a point you raised earlier as well, as far as short-form content. And that is, I know that's an issue you've raised before as far as your provider. Is that driving user experience in a different way than long form? I'm just kind of curious. That is there a difference in discovery, playback, maybe even interactivity? I'm curious because I've written for the magazine about short form being something of a driver in OTT and changing the user experience to an extent. And I'm just wondering if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, yeah, no, it's just following up on that. We've, as movie makers, we've been driven to, you make a theatrical at 88 minutes or whatever, and that's great. But with changing attention spans, albeit attention spans with binging. So, so it's how do you capitalize on somebody's desire or, changing habit that I've only got 22 minutes at right now, but I really love this content. So how can you do that without just pausing it and wondering, well, am I leaving at the right moment in time or the moment in time I have to leave because I've got to make my 2:32 train, whatever it is that's driving you in that experience. So we're just trying to adapt to these changes and, and not jump full force into it, but prove our hypothesis about this. So, for example, a movie we did called The Prayer Box, it came out theatrical, but then it was crafted in a means that it can be broken out into a miniseries intelligently. So now, with the other tools and binging and things like that, we've got a very high completion ratio of the content, so it didn't distract from the movie. The movie was being finished, but it was being consumed in a binge-style method or on an individual. So you're just adapting to the changing times.
Definitely, and there are even whole studios apparently now devoted to short form as well. Chris, I wanted to follow up on a content point you raised, which was about localization and the idea of how that might impact different user experiences.
Yes, pardon me. Certainly for us, as we bring Gusto to new markets and establish in new markets, localization is very, very important to us. Later on this year, we're going to start creating content in Asia and Europe. Now that we've got significant eyeballs down here, we'll be producing content here as well for our multiple feeds. I said earlier on in my presentation that we believe that food is the one true global language, and this is true, and this is what we think is the strength of Gusto, is that no matter your God, your postal code, no matter where in the world you live, you're going to go home and you're going to sit down with somebody that you love, and you're going to have a meal, and you're going to talk about your life, and that's true everywhere. And we designed Gusto to be a global brand with food and culture and hosts, predominantly millennial from all over the world, talking as much about culture and about stories about their lives and their homes as it is about food. But to really, really reflect people's lives back to them, you've got to go to the territories you're in and you've got to shoot content there. But hopefully the content that we shoot in Asia, we can also air in our Latin American feed and vice versa, that we craft those stories so they're equally relevant on the different platforms that we have in different parts of the world.
So localized, but also possibly all-encompassing,
Yeah,
depending on
it's all how you tell a story and
Exactly.
you build it. Like for talking about long-form content, short-form content. To me, us at Gusto, we believe that when you go home at the end of the day, whether it's on a tablet or a big, immersive 4K screen, you watch television or you watch content, you get a beer or a glass of wine, you sit down and you watch this for one reason only, and that is to be entertained, to be taken away from your lives, and to relax and to enjoy yourself. And, that's at the core of what we do.
Thank you. Christian, I have one last directed question, which is I've wanted to ask someone from Comcast for quite a while, like Amazon. And that is, you've alluded a few times to both linear, traditional, and over-the-top. Does your work with Comcast, does one inform the other? Does the user experience to serving the viewer, in the case of over-the-top, of course, today, have you learned lessons from your linear TV and interactive and engagement experiences that can speak to OTT and vice versa? I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that what we're doing is basically taking all the knowledge we have from having the task of integrating all your traditional TV content into one universal search and discovery is what we're applying to OTT as well. We all know that if you have a pay TV subscription, you have more channels and more content than you can ever watch. So the idea of having to like find something across this already exists as an existing problem. Imagine if you had your pay TV subscription as every channel had their own search and you had to find something, that'd be a terrible experience. So it's essentially what we've already done across traditional TV that we're now doing across OTT, and importantly, across both. So I think fragmentation is definitely the problem that has to be solved around OTT. And I think that we'll find out that it's not just about finding new content to watch. The way we look at it is 2/3 of the time, we're just trying to find you back to the content that you already found before. Right. So having voice be part of your way of consuming that content, having resume points, so you go to one place and you see, all the different TV shows that you're watching and the next episode that's available to watch, regardless of whether that's an app or a traditional pay TV provider.
Thank you. I'm really tempted to have Dave and you two guys on voice chat for a little while, but I want to save time for questions. I have one last question for our trenders here, but we're running low on time, and I want to make sure we have time for questions either from our streaming audience or definitely from the audience here. So let me open it up for questions here. If anybody has a point for either the trenders or definitely the panel. Have a mic.
Question going back to interactivity. It's just because of the panel and the makeup of the people, I think we're taking a very narrow view of that. So if looking at things worldwide, one thing I'm seeing is in markets where online gambling or wagering is legal, like in the UK, what they're trending towards now is what's called in-event wagering. So there's already systems in place where you can watch a soccer match and they'll proffer, is this a goal going to be scored, something like that.
Right.
And they're trending towards having an app where you split screen, you see the game, and below you have the offers and you can make it. You need, one is obviously low latency, but it's an interactivity thing. Seeing it for online gambling play, table games, combination, low latency, and I know this is niche and it's different than OTT, but we're just starting to see that's where interactivity is starting to rear its head in sort of that area.
Right. Do you have a specific point you want to query the panelists on? I completely agree with you.
This is
well, I
something
can highlight that there definitely are places where we're seeing interactivity. On Twitch, for instance, there's a lot of this that you already see on laptops and desktops, and we're trying to take that Twitch experience to an OTT experience where you can be watching an esport game and then there's a dialogue going on. And I do agree that the area of gambling is going to kind of start to flow into this, where there will be this benefit that because you have this kind of direct-to-consumer interaction, you can actually have the way for that consumer to either answer a vote, yes, no, or to do some type of wagering. So it will be out there. I'm just saying it's a little bit early days, but I do see some exciting opportunities.
Yeah, thank you.
I would add that we also do have a whole team focused on that kind of interactivity. So, for instance, voting in game shows or reality shows is definitely something we've leaned into and have been very successful with across The Voice and other shows.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it is early, but that's where it's coming first.
Oh, maybe not as early as you think. My old boss, Eric Shanks at Fox, has spun up an entire division for sports betting just based on what's happening in that here as well, not only overseas. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Quick question for the trenders, I guess. How much does social media play into what you watch, how you watch it, and what you do after you watch it? I mean, recommendation is a kind of a big thing. We understand that, but how much do you find out from social?
Usually, I find that on social media, you might have spoilers for things that are like shows that are just released or something like that you might want to avoid. But in general, it's usually my friends who are the ones that are recommending like great new shows to me rather than finding them out from social media.
Once I like a show, I'll start following it on Twitter sometimes, and there's certain reality shows that I watch that I will check Twitter while I'm watching it just because the tweets are so funny.
I'm kind of like Vlad because my friends keep telling me to watch all these like amazing shows that I love now. Like one of them is Fuller House, and I love it.
So friends' recommendations more than kind of surfing social media. Okay, thank you. Any other questions out there? Yes, please.
Yeah, hi, Mike Bloxham from Magid. That was a perfect riff, actually, from social to what I was going to ask about. It seems to me it's been a very long time before we've seen any kind of integration with social media on any of the OTT platforms. Double-barrel question, why do you think that is? And if you're doing anything about that, I'd love to hear about it.
So we definitely keep on being very focused on this. I can actually tell you that Sam from my team, that's one of her focuses, is trying to figure out how does social play in on the TV screen. We've seen various of the big names in social try different things. I don't know that it's been fully successful yet, but I think we'll keep on seeing how the various big social apps will try to find the right experience on the TV.
And just talking from the service side, it's about where do you place your bets. I don't disagree that it has a place, but for a small company, the question is it our place to lead and blaze that industry as opposed to wait for well-established mechanism and tools to allow us to take advantage of it. And so for us, it's about the content at the end of the day. So we'd rather, at this moment in time, spend our resources and time in bringing the best in content and experience to the marketplace, in order to consume that, rather than blaze that trail that might come or should come. We'll wait for it per se, rather than be the leader in it.
Go ahead, Dave.
There's some interesting things Amazon's playing around with. In books, you have something called Goodreads, which is almost like a private network for doing recommendations. And we think there's going to be a Goodreads for the OTT space where you can actually have just your closest friends that you'll be able to interact with and get recommendations. I think now when people go to Facebook, they feel like it's the show actually doing more of the posting than their friends posting. And so we think there's an intimacy that you can get by taking the concept of Goodreads for books to the OTT space.
We got time for one more? I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so Kurt, I'll let you choose.
Yeah, another question for the Trender panel. Most of this has been on entertainment content. How important is local news, weather, and traffic to the three of you? And if it is important, where do you get that information from?
I generally don't go to TV for anything like that anymore, just because TV for me is more of an on-demand kind of thing rather than a streaming cable kind of thing. And if I want news, I want it immediately, so I'll just do a quick Google search.
Local news is important to me in certain aspects, like political races and things like that. And I watch the local one. It's all news and kind of see what's happening. But with national news, I just get it on Twitter.
I usually look on my phone for the weather, or like if there's like a tornado, weather reports about like flooding or something, I would go on to the TV and watch the news.
Thank you. And I'd like to keep this going, and I really hate to let this panel go because it's such a great group. But I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you all very much, and please join me in thanking the panel.